Okay, so the font family, Lotto, that was for my body text. So I'm actually going to take that, I'm going to hit Command X to both delete it and copy it. And then I'm going to go back up here to the body and add it in. And I can see, even though I don't want that to be Tom Waits to take on that font family, because I gave it to the body right now, everything is inheriting that font. It's not a big deal, and that's actually what I want because the heading font that I want to use is going to be used in fewer places. So I first give the body text font family to the body, and then I can give this to whatever I now want to target. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command X and go back up under here under header and add in my H1. And really I could give that either to the H1 or the header. If I want all the text in the header to be this font, I could add it either place. I'm going to go ahead and just give it to the H1. That font family just says what font, it doesn't say what font size, or excuse me, what font weight. So I'm going to go in here because I wanted it bold. That means I need to add in the font weight property. And I have to remember what font weight I had. I had 400 and 700. So I went ahead and gave it the font weight 700. And now I'm going to go ahead and do font size. I'm going to go with, I know my line height is 150 pixels, so I'm going to go with maybe 140 pixels. Oh, I have a little problem right there. You guys see I added in too many colons. Okay, that I think looks like a great introduction to my webpage. Last thing I'm going to do is add in a border to the bottom of the H1. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and add it to the bottom of the header so that it can stretch all the way across. So I want a border, but you can see my box over here. I don't want it around the whole thing. I actually just want a bottom border. So my property, I can target it with just bottom border. Oh, excuse me, not bottom border, border bottom. That's better. I have to say how much. I'm going to do 1 pixel. I have to say what kind. I'm going to do solid. And what color. I'm going to go ahead and do white. All right, now I can see this thin border down here. That's separating it from this main content area. I actually am going to do the same thing above the footer. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this here and bring it down to the footer. But instead of a border bottom, I'm going to go ahead and change bottom to top. Now I just have that thin line there, and I have a good area for my content as I add it. So it's just a nice little separation. All right, let's go ahead and start to add some content. So I'm going to go over to my Wikipedia page. And choose what makes sense. So maybe I'm going to start with an about section or an introduction to Tom Waits. So this seems like a little too much, but maybe just this first paragraph would be good. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Go over to the HTML document, and I'm going to think about how I want to break this content up. I need to add some different elements in here to make my web page visually interesting. So I'm going to have a bunch of text content and a bunch of image content, and I need to figure out the layout for those so that they look good together. All of that is going to be inside the main element, however, so I'll go ahead and open the main. And if I think back to how I sectioned out the content for my resume, I can do the same thing here, and I should. So before I actually start to add in my paragraph of text, I need to think about this as being the first section. So I open in section element. Then inside that section element, I'll go ahead and add a paragraph. Then inside that paragraph is where I'll paste in my content. And I want to clean this content up. Like I said before, I don't want these, I don't want these numbers. I'm not concerned about citations for this project. All right, that looks pretty good. Now that I have some paragraphs of text, I'll add more in just a minute, but I want to think about how do I want this all styled out. So this section, I'm going to go ahead and give it an ID and call it bio. So that I can target this section later in my CSS. Also, this paragraph, I'm going to give it a class equal to, basically I'm going to want to make my paragraphs staggered with images. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a class that I can apply to other paragraphs. Remember, the ID I can only give to one thing ever in my entire site, but a class I can give to multiple things. So I gave my section ID of bio, and that's the only thing I will ever give the ID bio. But this class I'm giving to this paragraph right now, I can give to other paragraphs and other elements, anything I want. So I'm going to go ahead and call this class just text. I'm going to use it often just to kind of bring in text. So actually, I'm going to call it ptext. So paragraph text, ptext. Okay, so I have this section that I can work with, and I have this paragraph right now that I can go ahead and work with. Before we jump over to style this paragraph, I'm going to go ahead and add in an image. So insert IMG, and I don't have any images yet, so first I'm going to go ahead and actually get some images. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that out for now. And before we start to style this paragraph, I'm going to insert an image, and I don't have any images yet, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to my browser window, go over to my images, and I'm going to choose a couple of images to work with. Okay, once you've gathered your images, you have to make sure they are in your root directory. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my preview really quick just so I can see my folder. Go ahead and open that up, and I'm going to go to the column view so I can really see where I'm putting these. Here's my project folder, here's my index and my CSS. I'm going to go ahead and add a folder in here to keep all my images in. I'm going to call that folder images. For the project, you need to add at least 6 images, but you can always do more than that. And to make things easier on myself, I'm going to go through and actually change the name of these images. Okay, so I have all my images in my images folder, along with everything else in my root directory. I'm going to go ahead and bring my preview back up. There we go. And first thing, I want to insert an image in this section. So I'm going to go ahead and add it here after the paragraph. And I could just add my image in. I've started to type my image tag, but I want to show you another element that, actually let's just insert the image and then I'll show you that on a different one. So my tag is IMG. I have to give it the source attribute to let it know where that image exists. So src equals quotation. And I can see here brackets is helping me out. So I first click on the folder name. Here's images. That takes me inside that folder. And then I can choose any of these images that I want. So I actually don't know which one I want. I'm going to go ahead and go back out here. Okay, I've made my choice. I'm going to go with actually image 8. And when you insert an image, you also need to add one more attribute for alt equals quotation, and then you describe the image. Remember, this is the alternative, so that if for some reason the image doesn't show up, it'll show that text. Or if a viewer is, or a client is accessing your website and they aren't able to visually see it, they're accessing it through a reader, then it will read them this description. So you want to keep it short and sweet, but descriptive. You do use grammar, punctuation, and all of that as well. Then I can see red out here. That reminds me I did not close my angle bracket. So there is no closing image tag. It is a self-closing tag. So all I need is to insert the image. I don't need a closing image tag. So I now see my image below this text, but I actually want this image to float up here next to the text. Before I can do that, I have to give it space to do that. So right now I see that my text goes all the way across. So the first thing I need to do is make this paragraph of text smaller. So I can go ahead and target that paragraph here. I'm going to target that class because later I might want to go ahead and use this class again. So I'm going to bounce over to my style CSS. Choose where to place this. This is inside the main, so I'm going to go ahead and add some space in here. And I'll target that class. I have to begin a class with a period, and then the name that I gave it, which was p-text. Has to be exact. Whatever was capitalized has to be capitalized. And if I don't set it, then the width is 100% because it is a block level element. So I need to make the width smaller. I'm going to go with 50%. Now I can see in my preview, I have room for that image to move up next to the text. It didn't. It won't do it by default. I now have to tell it to. So I'm going to go ahead and create 2 more classes. I want to create these as classes so that I can float, and there are other things I'll want to float. So I'm going to create one class called float right and give it a property of float set to the right side. And I'll make a float left property, selector, and set the float property to left. With floating, there's only left and right. Remember, there's no up and down.